What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. It is NFL Week 4, and we are taking a look today in this video at some trade for candidates at the running back position, some RB trade for targets, guys that we're trying to buy low here after maybe a down Week 3, or just simply because we expect these players to begin their ascent soon at the running back position. So make sure you hit subscribe on this channel, like on this video, and drop your comments below with the running backs that you would like some information on as to whether or not you should trade for these players, or maybe you're looking to sell high on somebody and trade them away. In my last video that I put up earlier today on wide receiver trade for targets this week, I talked about how I traded Devon Achane, and you can see him here at the very top of the list from the Week 3 running back performers, and Zach Moss, who is the RB5 on the week. I traded both of those players for a running back that definitely didn't have a great week, but we know the guy has greatness within him. It's Derrick Henry. I made him the thumbnail of this video because I think he is one of the most interesting cases on whether or not you should be buying low on Derrick Henry heading into Week 4. Here's how this video is going to work. Going to just take a look at the performances, the fantasy point totals from all the running backs in the NFL from Week 3, and decide whether or not that recent performance is something that can help you or hurt you when it comes to trading these players in Week 4, whether it's trading for somebody, trading away somebody. That's the name of the game, because we know that fantasy managers definitely do pay attention to recency bias. It's within us. There's nothing that we can do to stop it. We can try and tone it down a little bit, but at the end of the day, what just happened is always going to be important to people, and I think you can use that to your advantage when thinking about the trade market. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the list. We're going to scroll past a lot of these names that were high-performing names because generally, I should say, those guys are not going to be as easy to acquire off of a big week. Like if you're ever going to trade for Christian McCaffrey, nobody's ever going to trade him to you. But if you were going to try, you wouldn't try it off of a week where he had 23 fantasy points. You try it on the rare occasion where he doesn't perform well. So we're going to scroll down. You don't have to scroll that far like at the wide receiver position to find running backs that didn't perform, because it's just the nature of the position these days is split backfields. It's why I tend to draft wide receivers early in my fantasy drafts. You don't necessarily find too many workhorse running backs, and even the ones that you think are going to be workhorse, they aren't always going to perform in PPR as well as the highest scoring wide receivers. So let's go ahead and take a look toward the bottom of this list and see if there's anybody that we can pry from their managers this week in trade offers. Bijan Robinson is the first name that pops out to me because he scored only 10 points. And we know that that's probably going to be about his floor, right? The first 2 weeks, 20 points, 21 points. The Falcons offense is going to have weeks like this one where they just didn't perform. 6 points against the Detroit Lions. That led to maybe a quieter day for Bijan Robinson. But what you love to see, and why you shouldn't panic if you have Bijan, don't trade him. The people that watch this video are going to understand that Bijan Robinson we're still very high on, not panicking in any regard. But again, it's not even a panic sell if somebody would consider trading him after what we saw Week 3. It's just a notion of each data point that comes into fantasy football from the weekly performances is going to have an impact on the manager, right? If you say, oh, it's possible for Bijan Robinson to only get 10 points. Before that, you thought, oh, he's getting 20 every week. We know that that's not how fantasy works, but somewhere in our brains, we do think that way and say, oh, man, if he's only going to be getting me 10 points, should I be considering something here? Well, no, of course not. You should be just loving that you have Bijan Robinson, especially because 6 targets, 4 receptions, 27 yards. The yardage doesn't make you go crazy, but that's 6.7 fantasy points that even if he has a day like this that's a dud running the football, he still ends up on the first page, a top 25 running back for the week with 10 fantasy points in PPR. Is it great? No, but you love Bijan Robinson for the volume that he's going to continue to get and the role that he has in an offense that wants to run the football. And when it's not running the football, it's probably dumping it off short because Desmond Ridder is not that much of a quarterback. So if you could try to trade for Bijan Robinson this week, by all means do it. But do we think it's realistic? No, not necessarily. Although I would say if you were going to make a charge at it, you're offering guys like Devon Achane and Zach Moss. Jerome Ford, I think, is probably somebody that you can just expect to continue to be a stud. But would I rather have Ford versus Bijan? I'd rather have Bijan. Although end of the season could come and we could say, yep, Jerome Ford just did it every week, and we should have seen that coming. But absolutely, I'm trying to trade Alexander Mattison. If I can go Alexander Mattison and Achane for a running back lower on this list, that's a great example of something we'd like to try and do. Not a believer in Madison's talent. I don't know how he ended up with 17 points this week, because every time I turned around, he was making a mistake on the football field. But Bijan Robinson, a huge trade for candidate. Is it likely? No. I'm going to put that at a high degree of difficulty, low likelihood, but always worth the shot. Jahmyr Gibbs is still a trade for candidate for me because I still believe we haven't seen the best of what he has to offer, and I do think this 8-9 point range is about going to be his floor. I'd like to see more targets. The fact that he only had one target this week is a little bit strange to me. Why can't the Lions decide to do both running the football and receiving the football with him in the same week? Previously, it was, he's going to have 9 targets for 7 receptions and 39 yards, but he only gets 7 carries. I would love to see him finish around 12 to 15 carries, 5 to 6 targets. If they can dial that in for Jahmyr Gibbs, I think we're going to be in for a great output toward the end of the season for fantasy. And the more weeks he continues to just be average, I think the easier he will be to acquire. So I still view Jahmyr Gibbs as a top 15 running back for the rest of the season. Like, there's a lot of guys that are above him on this list in terms of week 3 performance that I would definitely trade away to get Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know how realistic it is because people do remember where they drafted guys, but the later in the season you go, the more plausible it becomes to pick up some of these players. Like, we're only 3 weeks in, and Zach Moss, I think, largely it has proven that he is a different player than the one that you either drafted or picked up on waivers because he's getting opportunities and he's playing really well with those opportunities. Now, you do have to bake in the Jonathan Taylor factor, which is part of the reason that I chose this week to trade away Zach Moss. What if Taylor comes back? Well, that's going to have an impact on Zach Moss's role. So I think he is a trade away candidate right now. Devon Achane, I don't know if he's a trade away candidate. I wouldn't have done it had I not gotten a guy that I consider to be a potential star, especially when you get to the playoff schedule for Derrick Henry. But we'll get to Henry because he is not on the first page, nor is he on the second page of this list of week 3 running back performers. Javonte Williams is interesting. Only 8.5 points. I think it's just like Jahmyr Gibbs. The longer he goes where he's just very average, the more attainable he's going to become. People are going to just kind of get fed up with Javonte Williams. 3 weeks without a double-digit scoring output. But remember, the running back position is just kind of like this. So I don't hate Javonte Williams with where he's at right now. And if you have a manager that gets kind of stars in his eyes when he sees one of these early players who went for double-digit point total this week, I'd rather have Dameon Pierce is an interesting one, but I think I'd rather have Javonte Williams than Dameon Pierce just because I'm not entirely sure about this offense. And look, Dameon Pierce is just as capable of being in the single digits. He did it the first couple of weeks, so I think that's an interesting name to think about in the context of Javonte Williams, but he's not necessarily a top 20 running back, but I think he could get there. I believe in the talent of Javonte Williams, and a guy off an ACL should probably end up being better as the season goes along. So another name to keep in mind off of a pretty pedestrian week. Kyren Williams kind of came back down to earth this week. I think that makes him a little bit tougher to trade away. If you just look at those 2 numbers from week 1 and 2, you'd say, oh man, trading away Kyren Williams would have been great timing after week 2. Still think he's a guy with unquestioned volume in the Rams offense, but they're using him a lot. The workload is going to be a lot. I wonder how he holds up over the course of the season. But if you're a believer in Kyren Williams and his manager is a little bit, undone by the fact that he didn't have a double-digit total this week, maybe you check in on Kyren Williams with the manager in your league this week. But I don't think he's a great example of a buy low. Ramondre Stevenson is. Look, this Patriots offense is kind of yucky, but Ramondre Stevenson, the volume has been fantastic. It was again this week with 19 carries, only 4 targets, but that's still enough usually to get him a couple of receptions. He only ended up with 1 this week. But I love the double-digit carry totals in each game. I love that generally he's being used as a receiver. It's a little gross. You don't want to watch these Patriots games. You just want to plug Ramondre into your lineup and trust that the point totals are going to be there. But I think the weeks when he doesn't go for double digits, you trust the volume, and you could say, yeah, if somebody views him as more like a high-end RB2 instead of the top 12 RB1 that he genuinely is, I think, for the rest of the season, this might be the moment to try and trade for Ramondre Stevenson. And keep in mind, as we're talking about these guys to trade for, it's always going to be the names that performed well this week that we're trading away. Devon Achane, would you trade him away for Ramondre Stevenson? I certainly would. I know that there's risk involved in that, especially if you think that Raheem Mostert's going to get injured at some point. But if you're looking to cash in, Ramondre Stevenson, I think, is going to have a safer week-to-week floor than Achane, although that could change very quickly. Achane is not a guy that I am looking to unload off of the 1 week. Like I said, the only reason I happened to do it in one of my leagues this week is because I found that Derrick Henry was available, and I decided to take the plunge. We'll get to Henry as a potential buy low candidate here in a moment. Zach Moss, definitely somebody that I'm looking to trade away this week. That was part of the deal that I made for Derrick Henry, was Moss and Achane for Henry. And I also picked up Hollywood Brown in that deal. So other guys that you could, like James Conner. Cardinals had a great week. Conner's always going to have great volume, and he looks just absolutely rock solid. But if I could trade him for a guy that's in a better offense, and maybe it's a 2-for-1 where I pick up a guy like Travis Etienne, who I think, he's having good weeks, but is in a better offense. I'm always trying to upgrade a little bit and stay away from an aging player that, he's going to get the workload, and it's going to be fine for your fantasy team until it's not. I just am not that enthused by James Conner. I'm always going to look for emerging younger talent if I can try and make those swaps. I just think off of a 19-point week for James Conner, this would be a great time to trade him. I would trade James Conner for Jahmyr Gibbs. I probably wouldn't trade him for Javonte Williams, but that's kind of what we're thinking about is like who's going to emerge. Ramondre Stevenson, 100% I would trade Conner for Ramondre Stevenson. And when I say that, I always am saying I would add a bench piece as well to get that deal done because you got to have the other guys thinking that they are getting value as well. Roschon Johnson is a trade for candidate for me this week, and I would fire him up because we just saw what that backfield in Miami did to Denver this past week. They tore it apart. Roschon Johnson, the Bears are dysfunctional offensively, but Roschon Johnson's a talented player. And the more opportunities he gets, again, he was 8 for 38 in this game, so it's not like he was terrible. Averaged almost 5 yards per carry. He's going to get a few targets. That's not even speaking to what he could do potentially when he scores. Like week 1, he scored. This is what you could be looking at. That week from Roschon Johnson down the stretch would be absolutely fantastic. But I think this is still an opportunity to trade for him. The longer he kind of looks pedestrian, I think he ends up being a guy that you could have a real league winner on your hands down the stretch. Would I trade Javonte Williams for Roschon? Maybe not quite. Again, we kind of take a look back at the beginning of this list of guys that did perform well in week 3 that you could potentially move, like Zach Moss. Again, I'm looking to capitalize because even if we don't see Jonathan Taylor come back, we have seen several years of NFL production from Zach Moss, and this is the best he's ever been. James Conner. Would I trade James Conner for Roschon Johnson? Not quite. Not quite. I think I'm sticking with Conner for that. But these are the questions I'm asking. Would I trade Dameon Pierce for Roschon Johnson? I actually think I would do that. I'm higher on Roschon Johnson than maybe some people will be, but I believe the breakout is coming. Rachaad White. He's on the second page of this list, but I think he's there for good reason. I'm just going to mention that if he has another 21-point week, you need to trade him away. If I had made this video last week, I would have been pounding the table for you to move away from Rachaad White. I just don't think he's very talented. You might still be able to get decent value for him. I would try to go get Javonte Williams for him. I would take Kyron Williams for him. I would even consider Jaylen Warren for him because I think he overtakes Najee as the season goes along. I'm betting on talent, right, with these potential trades. I would add a sizable piece to get Ramondre Stevenson. Najee Harris, if you have him, I'm sorry. Trade him away after the first game where he scores a touchdown because you may be just looking at bad games all year. He'll have a good game. I would wait to trade him until immediately after that good game. Let's continue to look down this list, which is to say, by the way, Najee is not a buy low candidate. Do not trade for Najee Harris this week on the notion that you can buy him low unless, let's find some names. It would have to just be guys you almost picked up on waivers. I would rather have Zach Moss than Najee Harris. I just do not believe in Najee Harris moving forward. Rachaad White for Najee Harris is interesting. That's two guys that I don't really believe in. Sure, you can trade Latavius Murray for Najee Harris. Is there a 1-for-1 that I would legitimately do where I'm ending up with Najee Harris? Yeah, of the guys that are rostered, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'd rather have Najee Harris, but I don't think anybody's necessarily high on Clyde to be part of that trade. Dameon Pierce or Najee Harris, I'd probably lean Dameon Pierce. Pacheco, I lean Pacheco. Even Alexander Madison, who I would be looking to trade away this week, I would. He's going to have great volume. I just don't think he's that good. Maybe he'll have another good week against Carolina, and then you trade him before the Chiefs game. Might be the way to do that. And again, you just have to be trying to trade up a tier anytime you're doing this. All right, looking here, here's another guy that I would consider a buy low this week, Zach Charbonnet. He's already on my roster, so I won't be buying him low. But look at the uptick in productivity, in opportunity, really, I think is important to recognize here. 3 carries, 4 carries, couple of targets this week, couple of targets, but 9 carries for 46 yards, averaging over 5 yards per carry, getting those chances. Look, if Kenneth Walker ever should get injured, Zach Charbonnet will win people leagues. and I think there's still a moment in time right now to get him before it goes crazy. Zach Charbonnet would be a trade for candidate for me. Let me know in the comments if you have names that you want to know. Like, would you trade this guy for this guy? Drop those in the comments. I'll answer every comment that comes in. A little bit lower, is Breece Hall a trade for candidate? I think so. I mean, he's just been terrible. The Jets' offense is terrible, but Breece Hall is not going to be this bad every week. Even if you never trust Breece Hall in your lineup, if you can get him for a cheap price right now, I think you do that, and then you just wait to flip him until he has a big week on your bench. Or in the bye weeks, you may be like, hey, I don't have anything better than to start Breece Hall, because if you're trusting the talent, he's always capable of breaking one. I think he looks healthy. I just think the Jets are that bad. So Breece Hall, yes, tentatively I would trade for him. If you have a name that you want to know about, drop it in the comments and I'll let you know. All right, we have to go all the way down here to get to the name on the list that I really wanted to get to, which is Derrick Henry. Here's the full trade that I made. Devon Achane and his 51 points from week 3, and this is PPR settings. I traded Devon Achane along with Zach Moss, who had 22 points in PPR. I traded those 70 points for Derrick Henry's 2 points. Right? This is why it's possible to do it, because the dude literally got 2 points, and people remember that, and they maybe lost a week because of it, and they're upset about it, and they go, dude, I don't even care what happens. This guy just got 50. If he's talented enough to get 50, then that's who I want. I don't want Derrick Henry. Okay. I'm taking Derrick Henry. Partially, I don't think I would have done it 2 for 1 just for Henry, but because I got Hollywood Brown, who I think I can probably use during bye weeks. He's kind of the gross option because he's on the Cardinals, who are bad, but he also is going to get targets, and he's a talented player. Had a nice week. I think he had 17 points this past week. He fits into my flex nicely if I need to for bye weeks. Or I can package him with somebody to trade up at another position. He's a great 2 for 1 option for a guy that, a league mate that just has no wide receiver depth. For him, for that league mate, Hollywood Brown might be wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on their roster because they're losing Mike Williams or they're losing some of these other players to injury. Christian Watson, they drafted him, and they just don't understand why he can't ever be in their lineup, right? These are the kinds of things that people actually are dealing with in fantasy football. So I was able to get Derrick Henry. The risk in trading for Derrick Henry this week is that the Titans are bad. The nice part of it is they've been bad really the entire season. They got that win against the Chargers. Don't know how that happened. Offensively, though, they've been a little bit dysfunctional, but we still saw a world in which not a week ago, not 9 days ago, was Derrick Henry logging 25 rushing attempts, and he's getting a few targets as well. He can always do this in the receiving game. If you give him 3 targets, he's probably going to break one and get you a bunch of points just on that one play. He makes your week. It didn't happen this past week, so there's never going to be a better time to trade for him, right? Well, we'll see. I think that it could happen where, tough sledding against Cincinnati is certainly possible. I don't think he's washed from a talent perspective. I think that Derrick Henry is still a good player. He is a little older, a little slower, probably than he was last year. His offensive line is terrible. I'm banking on just the possibility that Derrick Henry overcomes some things that are going to be difficult to overcome for him. And I'm also banking on the Titans realizing they got to throw him the football, because if the line is bad, the only way to get him in open space is going to be the screen game. And I'm hoping that they ease into that a little bit more. He's still Derrick Henry, though. Like, if 3 weeks ago you could have said, hey, Devon Achane and Zach Moss, you're going to get Derrick Henry. I'm like, that's great. Zach Moss isn't even on my team. He's on waivers. I'm just going to pick him up as part of this. So it's a nothing ventured, nothing gained kind of scenario, even if Henry's bad. Now, could Moss end up being great? Sure. And I could end up holding the bag on an aging Derrick Henry. But I think at the end of the day, I'm still willing to take that shot because the opportunity cost, it doesn't feel like a lot. I mean, I have Jonathan Taylor stashed away on IR. Perfect scenario for me is he comes back, he resumes the number 1 role for the Colts in a couple of weeks, and Zach Moss is just sort of a third down back. Could it go the other way? Yeah. Maybe Taylor never comes back, and I just gave up the RB1 for the Colts, who happens to be playing really good football. But it's just a bet that you're making against future productivity when you look at Zach Moss and say, he hasn't really done it for that long, and we've seen him in the NFL before, and he didn't look like this. Derrick Henry usually does not look like this, where he's going 11 for 20. Those games happen, and Derrick Henry ends up being one of the best trade for candidates every year because he'll have these types of games. They do happen, and he doesn't catch a lot of passes, so usually his floor is the basement. I mean, he can have games where he scores 2 points if his offense isn't moving the ball. But he's still Derrick Henry, and I'm still willing to take the shot on it. I could regret moving on from Achane. Achane could outscore Derrick Henry the rest of the year. I think that is a distinct possibility. The Dolphins are very, very fun. But I took a shot. Let me know what you think about it. Would you trade Moss and A-Chain for Derrick Henry and Hollywood Brown. That's what I did this morning. I don't think this is a bona fide go ahead and do it. If you could go Derrick Henry and a wide receiver like Hollywood Brown, or pardon me, Zach Moss and a Hollywood Brown, Zach Moss and a, Zay Flowers maybe to get Derrick Henry. Just depends on your situation. Moss is a bona fide trade away for me. A-Chain, it's situational. I have A-Chain in a lot of other leagues, so I was okay to kind of take the plunge on King Henry in this one league. But I don't think he is a bona fide trade for because there are risks associated. If he has another week against Cincinnati in week 4, like the one he just had against Cleveland, Derrick Henry becomes honestly a better trade for candidate for me because I still think brighter days will be ahead, especially when you get to this playoff schedule of Houston, Seattle, Houston. That's unbelievable if you can get to the fantasy playoffs. But there are risks associated with Derrick Henry this year that I just don't think were as pronounced in past years with him. So maybe I did it 1 week too early. I could have waited and gotten to see the other guy squirm that has Derrick Henry, and then maybe he would have traded him for even less in a week's time. But I made the bet that I made. Let me know what you think as it pertains to these trade for candidates in fantasy football. I traded for Derrick Henry today. Who do you need to go out and trade for? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll talk about it here on the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. Make sure you hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel. Peace.